Most people don't realize when they lost their power. It didn't happen in one dramatic moment. It happened slowly, quietly, through constant explaining, constant reacting, constant noise. They speak too much. They defend too often. They react to things that don't deserve their energy. And over time, something subtle disappears. Their presence weakens. Their words lose weight. Their peace evaporates. The Stoics saw this coming centuries ago. Marcus Aurelius wrote that people exhaust themselves trying to control what was never theirs to control, other people's opinions, reactions, and approval. And today, this exhaustion has become normal. We live in a world that rewards noise, instant reactions, endless commentary, public emotions. But strength has never lived there. Real power has always lived in restraint. And that's what this video is about. Not silence as passivity, not silence as fear, but silence as discipline. Because silence, when chosen consciously, changes how the world responds to you. Look closely at the people who are never respected. They argue constantly. They explain themselves endlessly. They feel the need to be understood by everyone. And notice something important. The more they talk, the less seriously they're taken. This is not coincidence. Epictetus warned that if you want to improve, you must be willing to appear foolish for a time. What he meant was simple. Stop proving yourself. Stop narrating your worth. Because the moment you begin to explain yourself unnecessarily, you hand your authority away. You're saying, you decide if I'm valid, and the world takes that invitation gladly. Silence does something most people don't understand. It creates gravity. When you don't rush to fill space with words, people lean in. When you don't react emotionally, others grow uncertain. When you don't defend yourself, your presence becomes heavier, not louder, heavier. This is why calm people are intimidating. They're not empty, they're controlled. And control is rare. Think about this carefully. How many arguments in your life were unnecessary? How many explanations were never required? How many emotional reactions gave people power they didn't deserve? Most people don't suffer because they lack strength. They suffer because they leak it. They spend it on comments, on opinions, on misunderstandings, on people who won't remember the conversation tomorrow. The Stoics called this a loss of inner sovereignty. You gave your mind away. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire under constant pressure, betrayal, war, plague, political chaos. Yet his private writings are calm, measured, controlled. Why? Because he understood something modern men are rarely taught. You don't win by responding to everything. You win by choosing what deserves a response. Silence is not absence. Silence is selection.
Here is the uncomfortable truth. If you react to everything, people stop respecting you. If you explain everything, people stop believing you. If you defend yourself constantly, people assume you're unsure. This is not cruelty. It's human psychology. Certainty doesn't argue. Strength doesn't shout. Power doesn't explain itself. And no, this doesn't mean becoming cold or distant. Stoicism is not emotional suppression. It's emotional command. You still feel, you still care, but you choose when to speak and when not to. That choice alone separates leaders from followers. Right now, as you're listening, your mind may resist this idea. It may say, but if I don't explain myself, they'll misunderstand me. But if I stay silent, I'll look weak. But if I don't react, I'll lose. That voice is fear. Fear of being unseen. Fear of losing control. Fear of not being validated. The Stoics faced this fear directly, and they chose discipline anyway. Seneca once wrote that we suffer more in imagination than in reality. Most of the things you explain yourself over don't actually matter. Most of the judgments you fear never become consequences. Most of the people you're trying to convince are not listening. Silence exposes this truth, and that's why it's uncomfortable at first. Here's the shift that changes everything. When you stop explaining yourself, your actions start speaking. When you stop reacting emotionally, your calm starts speaking. When you stop chasing approval, your self-respect starts speaking. And the world notices. Not because you demanded attention, but because you no longer needed it. This is why silence feels powerful after it feels difficult. At first, it feels like loss. Later, it feels like freedom. And eventually, it feels like authority. Soon we'll go deeper. You'll understand why silence psychologically unsettles people, why it changes how they treat you, and why most men never master it despite desperately needing it. If this message already resonates, stay with me. You're not losing your voice. You're learning when to use it.
Most people don't realize when they lost control of their lives. It doesn't happen all at once. There's no dramatic moment, no clear warning. It happens slowly, one compromise at a time, one distraction accepted, one uncomfortable truth avoided. And before they know it, years have passed, and life feels smaller. The Stoics had a wordless understanding of this trap. Marcus Aurelius warned that the mind becomes shaped by what it repeatedly attends to, not what it wants, not what it plans, but what it tolerates. And most people tolerate far too much. Noise, approval-seeking, endless comparison, emotional reactions they don't question. This is where strength quietly dissolves, not through failure, but through unexamined living. Look around you. How many people are reacting instead of choosing? How many are scrolling instead of building? How many are angry, anxious, exhausted, and don't even know why? The Stoics would say this isn't bad luck, it's misdirected attention. When your attention is owned by the outside world, your inner world becomes weak. And here's the uncomfortable truth most channels won't say. The world doesn't need to defeat you. You defeat yourself by giving everything else control. Your emotions, your standards, your self-worth. The modern world is designed to pull you outward, out of yourself, out of stillness, out of discipline. That's why Stoic strength feels rare today, because it requires something most people avoid: sitting with yourself. No distractions, no validation, no performance, just awareness. Epictetus taught that freedom begins the moment you stop confusing what is yours with what is not. Your reputation, not yours. Other people's reactions, not yours. Their approval, not yours. But your thoughts, your choices, your effort, those are yours. And yet, most people abandon them. They spend their best energy worrying about how they're perceived instead of how they live. They manage appearances instead of character. They chase attention instead of respect. This is why they feel weak. Not because they lack talent, but because they leak power. Stoic strength isn't loud, it's quiet conservation. It's knowing when not to speak, when not to react, when not to chase. And this is where things begin to shift. Because once you see the illusion, you can't unsee it. You realize how often you explain yourself unnecessarily, how often you seek permission you never needed, how often you trade peace for momentary approval. The Stoics would call this slavery, not to people, but to impulse. And slavery always feels normal until you experience freedom. Freedom is waking up calm while the world rushes. Freedom is choosing restraint when others explode. Freedom is being misunderstood and remaining centered. That kind of freedom unsettles people because it exposes what they haven't mastered.
And this is where many viewers unconsciously lean forward because something inside them recognizes this truth. They don't want to dominate others, they want to govern themselves.
Marcus Aurelius said that the best revenge is not to be like your enemy. But this goes deeper. The greatest victory is not becoming like the chaos around you. Most people never reach this point because it requires patience, and patience isn't rewarded immediately. There are no likes for discipline, no applause for restraint, no instant feedback for integrity. But over time, something changes. Your presence becomes heavier. Your words carry weight. Your silence becomes noticeable. You don't need to assert strength. People feel it. This is why Stoic strength ages well, why it compounds, why it outlasts trends, youth, and noise. And here's the moment most people miss. You don't need to fix your entire life. You only need to reclaim one thing first: your attention. Where it goes, your life follows. If this reflection resonates with you, take a second to like the video. It helps this message reach someone who may be standing at the same quiet crossroads. And stay with me, because in the next part, we'll talk about the most difficult shift of all, why true strength often requires being misunderstood, and why that's not a weakness, but a sign you're finally free.
And this is where Stoic strength becomes rare. There's a truth most people avoid. The world doesn't reward potential. It only respects discipline maintained over time. Anyone can be strong when they're young. Anyone can be ambitious when everything is new. But the man who still trains his mind, still governs his emotions, still stands firm when no one is watching, that man becomes dangerous in the best possible way. Stoicism teaches that strength is not loud, it does not seek attention, it does not announce itself, it is felt. You see it in the man who doesn't rush to speak, in the man who doesn't explain himself, in the man who isn't reactive, bitter, or desperate to be understood. He doesn't argue with the world, he outlasts it. This is where most men fail. They spend years trying to prove something to others, their worth, their intelligence, their masculinity. But Stoics knew a brutal truth. The need to be seen is a form of weakness. The strongest men stop performing. They stop chasing validation. They stop reacting to every opinion. They become selective with their time, their energy, and their emotions. And this selectiveness changes everything. Look around you. How many men do you see who are constantly exhausted but have nothing meaningful to show for it? They're busy but not fulfilled, connected but lonely, talking constantly but saying nothing. They mistake movement for progress. Stoicism teaches something far more difficult: stillness with intention. To slow down without becoming lazy, to be calm without becoming passive, to be silent without becoming invisible. That balance is rare, and rarity creates respect. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Most men lose authority not because they become weak physically, but because they become predictable emotionally. They react the same way every time. They complain, they blame, they repeat the same mistakes and call it fate. A Stoic man does the opposite. He watches himself. He studies his reactions like an enemy would. And when he notices weakness, he doesn't hate himself for it. He disciplines it. Epictetus said something that cuts deep. No man is free who is not master of himself. That means if your mood controls you, if anger pulls your strings, if desire dictates your actions, you are not strong, no matter how powerful you appear. Real strength is self-command, and self-command becomes more valuable with age.
Here's why this matters for watch retention and for your life. People are terrified of aging, not because of wrinkles, not because of slower bodies, but because they fear becoming irrelevant. Stoicism offers a different ending, a man who continues refining his mind, who sharpens his judgment, who becomes emotionally stable instead of emotionally loud. He doesn't fade. He becomes a reference point. Others begin to seek his presence, not his approval. Think about the men you respect most. Not the ones who talk the most, not the ones who dominate every room, but the ones whose words land heavier because they speak less. That is Stoic gravity. It's built slowly, silently, over decades of restraint. Most people won't do this work. They'll choose comfort. They'll numb themselves with entertainment. They'll call discipline too extreme and depth too serious. And that's fine. Stoicism was never meant for the crowd. It was meant for men who want to age upward, not outward. Men who want their later years to be defined by clarity, not regret. Here's a principle that keeps viewers watching because it hits home. Your future self is watching what you tolerate today. Every time you avoid discomfort, every time you explain instead of act, every time you react instead of pause, you are training weakness. But every time you choose restraint, every time you stay calm under pressure, every time you act without applause, you are building legacy. This is where next phase will take us. Not into motivation, not into empty inspiration, but into legacy. What remains when strength is no longer physical? What survives when attention disappears? What kind of man you become when the world stops cheering? And most importantly, what it means to live in a way that still matters even when no one is watching. If this part resonated with you, stay with me. The final part is not about strength, it's about what strength is for and why very few men ever reach it.
There comes a moment in every man's life when noise stops impressing him. Not because he has won, not because he has lost, but because he has finally seen enough. Enough applause that meant nothing. Enough arguments that changed nothing. Enough chasing that never brought peace. The Stoics believed this moment was not a crisis, it was an awakening. Marcus Aurelius wrote to himself, not to impress the world, but to remind himself of something simple. You are here for a short time. Live accordingly. Most people don't live that way. They live as if they have endless tomorrows, as if they will someday slow down, as if meaning can be postponed. But Stoicism teaches something sharper, something honest, something uncomfortable, that the quality of your life is not measured by what you acquire, but by what you become when no one is watching. And this is where legacy truly begins. Not legacy as fame, not legacy as wealth, but legacy as character. The kind that doesn't announce itself, the kind that doesn't demand recognition, the kind that remains steady whether the world approves or not. Think about the men you quietly respect, not the loud ones, not the flashy ones, the calm ones, the grounded ones. The men who don't panic when things fall apart, the men who don't beg for validation, the men whose presence alone makes others feel stable. They didn't become that way by accident. They learned to endure without bitterness, to act without needing applause, to stand firm when it would have been easier to fold. Stoicism never promised an easy life. It promised a meaningful one. And meaning does not come from comfort. It comes from alignment, from knowing who you are, from choosing what matters, from letting go of what doesn't. Most men never reach this stage, not because they can't, but because they are too distracted. Distracted by comparison, distracted by resentment, distracted by the illusion that happiness lives somewhere outside themselves. The Stoic sees through this illusion. He understands that the world will always be uncertain. People will always judge. Loss will always be possible. So instead of fighting reality, he masters himself. He trains his mind to remain calm in chaos. He trains his emotions to obey reason. He trains his actions to reflect values, not impulses. This is where true strength lives. Not in domination, not in control over others, but in control over one's own reactions. Epictetus taught that no one can harm you unless you allow it, not because pain isn't real, but because meaning is chosen. Two men can face the same hardship. One becomes bitter, the other becomes wise. The difference is not circumstance, it is perspective, and perspective is trained. This is why Stoicism is not a philosophy you read once. It is a discipline you practice daily. You wake up, you prepare your mind, you remind yourself that obstacles will come, that people will disappoint, that outcomes are uncertain, and you decide in advance how you will respond. Calm, steady, deliberate. This is how men outgrow chaos. This is how they stop being controlled by emotions. This is how they become rare. And here is the truth most people never say out loud. At the end of your life, no one will care how clever your excuses were. No one will remember how loudly you defended yourself. No one will count how many arguments you won. They will remember how you made them feel. They will remember whether you were reliable, whether you were calm under pressure, whether your presence brought stability or stress.
That is legacy. And legacy is built quietly, daily, through choices no one applauds. Choosing patience instead of reaction, choosing discipline instead of indulgence, choosing silence instead of ego, choosing principle instead of popularity. The Stoics believed that if you live correctly, death is not something to fear, because nothing essential is left undone. You showed up. You acted with integrity. You carried your responsibilities without complaint. You didn't waste your life chasing approval. That is enough. And if you're listening to this right now, it means part of you already knows this. You wouldn't be drawn to Stoicism if you were satisfied with shallow living. You wouldn't be here if noise still fulfilled you. Something in you wants depth, stillness, strength. So here is the final reflection I'll leave you with. If your life ended tomorrow, would your mind be at peace with how you live today? Not perfect, not impressive, but honest. If the answer is uncertain, that's not failure, that's awareness. And awareness is the beginning of change. Take what you've learned, apply it slowly, live it quietly, and become the kind of man whose strength doesn't need explanation. If this video gave you something to think about, leave a comment below with one word that describes the man you are becoming. If you want to continue walking this path, subscribe to Real Stoic Word. And remember, stay grounded, stay unshaken, stay stoic.